A signal in the silence. It began with a whisper, deep within the Arctic Circle, where Earth's most advanced deep space monitoring array hummed quietly beneath an endless night sky. An alert sounded. The signal, faint yet distinct, pulsed with an intricate rhythm. Operators froze, then scrambled to decipher the impossible. It wasn't just noise, it was language. By the time the data reached United Earth Command, it had resolved into a formal communique. Strange symbols cascaded across screens, shifting and twisting as translation software churned. When the message finally stabilized into English, its meaning sent shockwaves through the corridors of power. To the leaders of Earth, you are summoned to the Galactic Council to represent your species. Prepare immediately. President Nathan Carter sat alone in his office, the holographic projection of the message rotating lazily above his desk. The words cast a strange glow on his weathered face. Carter was no stranger to crisis. He had led through economic collapses, rising sea levels, and a global pandemic. But this was something entirely new. Summoned, he muttered, leaning back in his chair. Not invited. Summoned. A soft chime announced the arrival of General Lin Chen and Dr. Eliza Monroe. The general, stoic as ever, carried the weight of Earth's defense strategy on his broad shoulders. Dr. Monroe, head of the Stellar Communication Division, was already flipping through a tablet filled with alien script. Mr. President, General Chen began. Their fleet has taken position just outside Mars. 20 ships, maybe more. Massive, but... He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. They don't appear optimized for combat. Carter raised an eyebrow. And what do they appear optimized for, General? Dr. Monroe interjected, her voice tinged with fascination. Diplomacy, perhaps. Their ship designs are ceremonial. Ornate hulls, no visible weaponry, minimal shielding. It's as if they're meant to inspire awe, not fear. Carter's gaze didn't waver, or they think they don't need weapons to handle us. Silence fell as the implications settled over the room. For years, Earth had debated how first contact with extraterrestrial life might unfold. The optimists imagined shared knowledge and unity. The realists prepared for invasion. This scenario, being summoned by an interstellar assembly, was one no one had fully anticipated. What else do we know? Carter asked, breaking the silence. Dr. Monroe tapped her tablet, bringing up a rough translation of the Council's broadcasts. The Galactic Council is a coalition of 30 species, united by mutual interests in diplomacy, trade, and maintaining peace. They see Earth as a developing civilization, one they believe is ready for integration. General Chen scoffed. Developing? They clearly haven't studied our history. Perhaps they have, Carter countered, his tone sharp. But from their perspective, we might seem primitive. We have no colonies beyond our moon, no interstellar fleet. To them, we're a backwater. The question is, why reach out now? Dr. Monroe hesitated. It's hard to say. Their message stresses peaceful intentions, but the timing is unusual. It's possible they see an opportunity to shape our future before we grow too powerful. Carter's eyes narrowed as he turned back to the hologram. Or they think we're a threat already. Across the planet, preparations began at a frantic pace. The diplomatic vessel Aurora was readied for launch, its crew handpicked from Earth's brightest minds. Carter personally oversaw the selection process, balancing scientists and diplomats with tacticians and strategists. If the Council believed humanity would walk meekly into the fold, they would learn otherwise. In the days leading up to the departure, Carter visited Earth's vast defense grid. Hidden deep within the oceans and mountains were weapons systems capable of unimaginable destruction. Humanity had spent decades perfecting these technologies, not for conquest, but survival. Earth had fought too many wars to underestimate the value of preparedness. Let them see the side of us they want to see, Carter told his inner circle during a final briefing. Humble, curious, eager to learn. But make no mistake, we're not walking into this blind. If they think we're naive, we'll let them keep thinking that. And if they expect weakness. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. When the day of departure arrived, the aurora rose into the sky like a gleaming arrow, cutting through the atmosphere with a grace that belied its formidable construction. Inside, Carter and his delegation were silent, each lost in their own thoughts as the ship approached the alien fleet. The vessels waiting beyond Mars were even more massive up close, their surfaces shimmering like living glass. The Council's flagship, the Eminence, dwarfed them all. As the Aurora docked, Carter straightened his jacket and took a deep breath. The airlock hissed open, revealing a delegation of alien figures, their forms a kaleidoscope of biology and technology. At their center stood a tall, luminous being whose voice resonated directly in the minds of the humans. "Welcome, representatives of Earth," it said. "The Galactic Council awaits your presence." Carter stepped forward, his expression calm but unyielding. "Thank you for your hospitality," he replied, his voice steady. "We're honored to be here." As the humans followed their guides into the alien vessel, Carter allowed himself a brief glance back toward the Aurora. It was a small ship compared to the Council's fleet, but its significance was immense. For all its humility, it carried the weight of humanity's defiance, determination, and unyielding spirit. The Galactic Council might have summoned Earth, but it would soon learn that humanity never came unprepared. The walk among giants. The air inside the Council's flagship was unlike anything the delegation had experienced, an ambient, ethereal hum that seemed to reverberate in their bones. President Nathan Carter and his team moved down a corridor that pulsed faintly with light, as if the ship itself were alive. The delegation was flanked by alien escorts, their towering crystalline forms gliding effortlessly. Carter stole a glance at General Lin Chen, who walked beside him with a composed expression, though his sharp eyes scanned every inch of their surroundings. Behind them, Dr. Eliza Monroe adjusted the sensor on her wrist, which was quietly recording every detail for analysis. At the end of the corridor, an enormous chamber loomed, a vast dome that seemed to blend metal and organic matter. The walls shimmered, displaying the star-speckled void of space. Rising tiers circled the room, each filled with alien representatives whose forms defied the limits of earthly imagination. Some were humanoid but faintly translucent, their internal organs glowing faintly. Others were masses of chitin and limbs, their heads crowned with luminescent fronds. A few were entirely mechanical, their smooth surfaces reflecting the chamber's light. The whispers began immediately. "They're smaller than I expected. Is this the dominant species? Why only one ship?" Carter heard it all, the translator embedded in his collar seamlessly converting the murmurs into English. He didn't flinch. Instead, he squared his shoulders and walked with deliberate, measured steps. "Let them underestimate us," he thought. At the center of the chamber stood a figure unlike the others. It towered above even the largest of the Council species, its body a swirling vortex of golden light encased in a translucent shell. This was the Arbiter, the Council's highest authority. When it spoke, its voice resonated in the mind, as much as in the ears. "Welcome, beings of Earth. Your presence marks a moment of significance for the galaxy. You are here because the Council has deemed your species ready to join our community." Carter stopped a few paces from the Arbiter, maintaining the formal distance. "Thank you for the invitation, Arbiter," he said. "We are honored to stand before you, but I must ask, why now? What has prompted the Council to reach out at this moment?" The Arbiter tilted its head, or what might have been its head. "Your question is direct, as is your nature. It is precisely your species' unpredictability that has brought you here. The galaxy has watched your progress for centuries. You are resilient, innovative, and dangerous. These qualities make you valuable allies or potential threats." The murmurs in the chamber grew louder, some tinged with disapproval at the Arbiter's bluntness. Carter allowed himself a small smile. "They think we're dangerous already. Good." As the Arbiter continued its speech, General Chen leaned subtly toward Dr. Monroe, his voice a low whisper. Are you getting all this?" "Every word," she replied, her fingers flying over her wrist console. "But there's something strange. The energy fields in this room, they're off the scale. It's like the chamber itself is alive." Chen nodded but said nothing, his eyes flicking back to the Arbiter. He had spent decades reading the nuances of power dynamics, and one thing was clear. Despite their lofty words, the Council feared Earth. Their ships, their ceremony, even this chamber, it was all designed to impress, to dominate. But beneath the grandeur was a thread of uncertainty. The Arbiter raised a luminous hand, and the murmurs ceased. Earth has demonstrated remarkable growth, but it is a growth shadowed by violence. Wars, weapons, and destruction define your history. Before you can join our collective, we must ensure that your kind will not bring that chaos to the stars. Carter stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "With respect, Arbiter, you misunderstand us. It is precisely because we understand the cost of war that we value peace so deeply. Our history may seem brutal to you, but it has taught us resilience, unity, and the power of diplomacy. We have not come here to sow chaos, but to learn and to contribute." The Arbiter regarded him for a moment, its golden light intensifying. Bold words, yet words are not enough. There is another matter that must be addressed. A hologram appeared in the center of the chamber, displaying Earth's defense grid in intricate detail. The room filled with whispers again, louder this time. Primitive, overly focused on planetary defense. Why so many weapons? General Chen stiffened, but Carter raised a hand to calm him. Our defenses are a reflection of our past. For centuries, we faced threats from within and without. We built our strength to ensure our survival, not to threaten others. The Arbiter's light dimmed slightly, as if in thought. Perhaps, but there are those within this council who see your kind as a threat that must be neutralized before it grows further. A new voice cut through the chamber, cold and sharp. "It would be prudent to ensure Earth does not overstep its bounds." Carter turned toward the speaker, a towering alien with metallic scales and eyes like molten lava. Its presence exuded authority and hostility in equal measure. "And you are?" Carter asked, his tone polite, but edged with steel. "I am Vorsha of the Uran Dominion," it said. "Our species has watched Earth's broadcasts, studied your history. You call yourselves peaceful, but your actions speak otherwise. You develop weapons even when unprovoked. Your wars have scared your world. What happens when those weapons reach the stars?" Carter held the alien's gaze, unflinching. "You're right. We've fought wars. We've made mistakes. But we've also rebuilt, innovated, united. Our weapons exist not because we seek war, but because we understand its cost. We don't fear war, Vorsha. We fear what happens when others assume we're too weak to defend ourselves." The chamber fell silent, the weight of Carter's words hanging heavy in the air. The Arbiter's light flared again, drawing all attention back to it. "The Council will deliberate," it announced. "Earth's fate will be decided soon." As the human delegation was escorted from the chamber, Carter glanced at General Chen. "Thoughts?" "They're divided," Chen said quietly. "Some see us as a potential ally. Others see us as a threat. Either way, they're afraid." Carter nodded. "Good. Let's make sure they stay that way." For now, the humans returned to their ship, the looming question of Earth's place among the stars unanswered. But one thing was clear. Humanity's resilience had already shaken the foundations of the Galactic Council. A test of trust. The air aboard the Aurora was thick with tension. Hours had passed since the humans left the council chamber, and the silence from the alien delegation was deafening. President Nathan Carter sat at the central table in the ship's briefing room. His advisors gathered around him. A holographic projection of the council's chamber flickered above the table, replaying key moments of their encounter. "They're stalling," General Lin Chen said, his voice low but firm. "The longer they deliberate, the more they're assessing us, watching how we respond." Dr. Eliza Monroe tapped on her tablet, analyzing energy readings from the council flagship. Their ship is transmitting low-frequency signals. It's subtle, but I think they're scanning us. Testing our systems. Carter leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. Let them scan. They won't find anything we don't want them to. The room fell silent as they considered their next move. Then, the ship's AI chimed in with a calm, neutral tone. Incoming transmission from the Galactic Council. Carter straightened. Put it through. The hologram above the table shifted to display the Arbiter, its swirling golden light dimmer than before. Its voice resonated directly in their minds once more. Representatives of Earth, the Council has reached a decision. To determine your species' readiness for integration, you will undergo a trial. A test of trust and cooperation. Carter exchanged a glance with General Chen. What kind of trial? He asked. The Arbiter's light pulsed rhythmically, as if it were deliberating. One of the Council's member species, the Avens, has requested assistance. Their colony on the planet Vorithis has been besieged by a rogue faction of their own kind. The Council's resources are stretched thin, and the matter requires swift resolution. Your task is to mediate and secure peace. General Chen frowned. Mediation. You want us to intervene in an alien conflict we know nothing about. The Arbiter's voice remained steady. Precisely. The Avens trust no other species to handle this matter impartially. If Earth succeeds, it will prove your ability to act responsibly on the galactic stage. If you fail, the Arbiter let the implication hang in the air. Carter folded his arms. And what guarantees do we have that this isn't some kind of trap? The Arbiter's light dimmed again. None. Trust must be earned. The Council will provide your ship with coordinates and a full briefing. The trial begins immediately. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the room in a heavy silence. Carter turned to his team, his expression unreadable. Thoughts? It's a setup, General Chen said bluntly. They're sending us into a situation they couldn't handle themselves, hoping we'll either fail or expose our weaknesses. Dr. Monroe adjusted her glasses. Or it's a genuine test. They want to see how we handle conflict, whether we'll resort to violence or find a peaceful solution. Carter rubbed his temples, considering their options. Either way, we don't have a choice. Refusing would confirm their worst suspicions about us. General Chen's jaw tightened. Then we need to prepare. If this is a trap, we need contingencies. Carter nodded. Agreed. Eliza, gather all the intel we have on the Avens and Vorithis. Lynn, ensure the Aurora is ready for anything. If they want a demonstration of what humanity is capable of, let's give them one. The journey to Vorithis took only hours, the Aurora racing through alien hyperspace corridors, unlike anything humanity had encountered before. When they arrived, the planet unfolded below them like a jewel. Vast oceans glimmering under a pale sun, broken by sprawling continents dotted with alien cities. The situation, however, was anything but idyllic. One of the cities smoldered with the aftermath of conflict, its once elegant spires reduced to rubble. The rogue faction's forces, visible even from orbit, were fortifying their positions on the outskirts. Charming, General Chen muttered as he studied the tactical display. They've got ground forces entrenched and air defenses in place. No sign of orbital weapons, though. Dr. Monroe frowned at the readings. The Avens are a species of builders, not warriors. This level of aggression is unusual. Carter stood at the center of the command deck, his gaze fixed on the planet below. Unusual or not, we need to resolve this without sparking a war. Chen, prepare a shuttle. We're going down. The general turned to him sharply. With respect, Mr. President, I can't allow that. It's too dangerous. Carter's expression hardened. This trial isn't just about strategy, General. It's about trust. If I'm not willing to meet these people face to face, we've already failed. After a tense pause, Chen nodded reluctantly. Then we're going in prepared. No chances. The shuttle descended through the planet's atmosphere, flanked by two smaller drones equipped with advanced sensors. As they neared the embattled city, The team caught their first glimpse of the Avens, tall, lithe creatures with elongated limbs and iridescent skin. Their movements were graceful, almost fluid, but their faces were etched with fear and desperation. The rogue faction, in contrast, wore crude exoskeletons that exaggerated their forms, making them appear monstrous. Their weapons were rudimentary by galactic standards, but devastating against the unarmed civilians they targeted. The shuttle landed in a neutral zone between the factions, its ramp lowering with a hiss. Carter, General Chen, and Dr. Monroe stepped out, flanked by a small security team. The air was thick with tension as representatives from both sides approached, a visibly nervous Aven elder and a defiant rogue leader. "You've come to judge us." The rogue leader sneered, his voice a low growl. "What could primitives like you possibly understand of our struggle?" Carter met his gaze without flinching. "We understand more than you think. Let's start by hearing both sides. If there's a solution, we'll find it. If not," his voice dropped, carrying the weight of his resolve, "we'll make one." The fate of Vorithus, and Earth's place among the stars, hung in the balance as the first steps of negotiation began. Carter knew this wasn't just a test of diplomacy. It was a test of humanity's strength, resilience, and ability to navigate a galaxy that was far from peaceful. The edge of understanding. The air between the two delegations was thick with hostility, a tension so palpable it seemed to ripple outward into the scorched landscape around them. President Nathan Carter stood at the midpoint, the neutral ground where the charred remains of an ancient stone monument lay scattered, a somber reminder of what was at stake. The Aven elder, Serath, stepped forward first, his elongated limbs trembling as though under the weight of an invisible burden. His iridescent skin shimmered faintly in the weak sunlight. "We have always been builders, architects of peace," he began, his voice a melodious hum. "The rogue faction has forsaken our ways, rejecting the harmony we have cultivated for generations." Opposite him, the rogue leader, a heavily augmented Aven named Korath, scoffed audibly. His exoskeletal enhancements clanked as he crossed his arms. "Harmony," he spat. "Your peace comes at the cost of freedom. You build towers while your people starve in the shadows of your creations. We've simply taken what should have been ours all along." Carter glanced between the two, his mind working quickly. This wasn't just a conflict over resources or ideology. It was a battle of survival. One side clung to a vision of order, while the other burned with the rage of the forgotten. He leaned subtly toward General Lin Chen, who stood at his right. "Your read on this?" "They're entrenched," Chen said quietly. "Neither side will back down without something to gain. If we can't offer a third option, this will spiral into an all-out war." Dr. Eliza Monroe, standing on Carter's left, adjusted her wrist sensor. "And it's not just a local issue," she murmured. "I'm picking up faint energy surges from underground. There's more to this planet than they're letting on. Whatever's beneath us, it's powerful and volatile." Carter stepped forward, raising a hand to silence both sides. His voice carried across the desolate plain, steady and firm. "We didn't come here to take sides or pass judgment. We came to find a path forward. But if we're going to help, I need the truth from both of you." Serath hesitated, his gaze shifting uneasily. Korath's mechanical eyes narrowed. "The truth," he echoed, his voice dripping with disdain. "The truth is that their council sent you here to do their dirty work, to silence us." "That may be what they expect," Carter replied calmly, "but that's not why we're here. If you want change, then talk to me. Tell me what you're really fighting for." Korath's posture stiffened, his augmented frame towering over Carter. For a moment, it seemed as if he might strike, but then he let out a harsh laugh. "Fine. You want the truth. Beneath this city lies the core, a relic of our ancestors, a source of immense power. The elders hoard its energy for their monuments, while the rest of us scrape by on scraps. We fight because we're done being forgotten." Carter turned to Serath. "Is this true?" The elder's shoulders sagged, the faint glow of his skin dimming. "The core is sacred," he admitted. "It sustains our cities, our technology, our very existence. But it is fragile. If mishandled, it could destroy us all." "So you fear what they might do with it," Carter said. "And you," he added, looking at Korath, "fear being left with nothing." The rogue leader sneered. "We don't fear them. We fear nothing. But we'll take what's ours, by force, if necessary." Carter took a deep breath, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He turned to his delegation. "Thoughts?" Dr. Monroe was the first to speak. "If the core is as powerful as they say, it could be a game changer, not just for them, but for the Council too. If we can stabilize it, we might be able to broker a compromise." General Chen nodded. "And if we can't, the core becomes a weapon. If it detonates, it could take this entire region with it." Carter's gaze hardened. "Then we stabilize it. Eliza, gather every piece of data you can on the core. Lynn, coordinate with our team to prepare for extraction. Just in case, if we're going to mediate, we need leverage." The negotiations resumed, but progress was slow. Every offer was met with suspicion, every compromise with resistance. Korath's faction demanded equal access to the core, while Surath's elders insisted on maintaining control to prevent disaster. As tempers flared, Carter felt the clock ticking down. Finally, he raised his voice, cutting through the chaos. "Enough. You both claim to want what's best for your people, but all I see is destruction. If we can stabilize the core, will you agree to a temporary truce?" Surath looked skeptical, his luminous eyes narrowing. "And who would you trust to handle such a task?" "Certainly not the rogues." "Not you, either," Korath shot back, his voice a growl. "You've done nothing but hoard its power." Carter stepped between them, his voice commanding. "Neither of you will handle it. My team will. We have no stake in your conflict, only in resolving it." The two leaders exchanged a long, tense glance before nodding reluctantly. "You have one chance, human," Korath warned. "Fail, and we take the core by force." Surath simply bowed his head, his expression weary. "May the ancestors guide you." As the delegation prepared to descend into the subterranean chambers housing the core, Carter stood on the edge of the city, gazing out at the broken skyline. "We're walking a fine line," he said to General Chen. "One misstep, and we ignite the very war we're trying to prevent." Chen adjusted his tactical harness. "We've walked fine lines before, sir. It's what we do." Carter smiled faintly, the weight of leadership momentarily lifted. "Then let's show them what humanity can do." The team descended into the depths of Vorithis, the flickering glow of the core growing brighter with each step. Above them, the factions waited, both hoping and dreading the outcome. Beneath the surface, the descent into the core's chamber was unlike anything President Carter or his team had ever experienced. The walls of the cavern pulsed faintly with a bioluminescent glow, veins of iridescent energy crisscrossing the surface like a living map. The air grew warmer and heavier with every step, carrying a faint hum that resonated deep in their chests. It was both beautiful and unsettling, a natural wonder transformed into a potential powder keg. General Chen took the lead, his tactical instincts sharp, scanning for threats with a handheld sensor. Dr. Monroe followed close behind, her eyes fixed on the data streaming across her tablet. The readings were erratic, the energy levels spiking unpredictably. "This place is alive," she murmured. "The core isn't just a power source. It's some kind of symbiotic system. If we disrupt it too much," she let the implication hang in the thick air. Carter, walking in the middle of the group, absorbed her words silently. His mind was already calculating the stakes. If the core exploded, it wouldn't just devastate the region. It could destabilize the entire planet. Yet, he couldn't allow the factions above to continue their cycle of destruction unchecked. "What's our plan if things go sideways?" Chen asked, his voice cutting through the hum. Carter didn't hesitate. "We stabilize it. or disable it entirely. If it comes down to a choice between this planet's survival and the core loses. Dr. Monroe glanced back at him, her brow furrowed. If we disable it, we'll plunge their entire civilization into chaos. The core powers everything: cities, infrastructure, even their life support systems. Carter's jaw tightened. Then we'll find a way to fix that too. One crisis at a time. The chamber that housed the core opened before them like a cathedral. The vast, crystalline structure pulsed at its center, its many facets glowing with an otherworldly light. Streams of energy coursed from the core to the surrounding walls, feeding the network that sustained the planet's civilization. But even to an untrained eye, the core's instability was obvious. Cracks webbed across its surface, flickering with uncontrolled energy. Monroe's tablet emitted a shrill beep. These energy surges are unsustainable. The core is destabilizing faster than we thought. Chen frowned. Faster, how fast? She adjusted her readings. We've got hours at best before it ruptures. If it goes, this entire region will become a crater. Carter took a steadying breath, his mind racing. Options. We can stabilize it temporarily by redistributing its energy flow, Monroe said. But it's a patch, not a solution. Long-term stability would require repairing the core itself, something we'd need their engineers to help with. Chen glanced at the crystalline structure. What about neutralizing it? Possible, Monroe admitted, but it would take time. And if we miscalculate, we could trigger the very explosion we're trying to prevent. Carter nodded, his decision made. We stabilize it first. That buys us time to bring both sides into the solution. As Monroe and the team set up equipment around the core, the hum grew louder, the energy arcs growing more volatile. Carter monitored the situation closely, his eyes darting between Monroe's frantic movements and Chen's vigilant scanning of their surroundings. We've got movement, Chen said suddenly, his voice low but urgent. His sensor picked up faint heat signatures approaching from the cavern entrance. Looks like Korath's faction. Armed. Carter's face hardened. They couldn't wait. Do we engage? Chen asked, already reaching for his sidearm. No, Carter said firmly. Not unless they force our hand. Hold your position. Minutes later, Korath himself appeared, his augmented frame looming in the flickering light of the core. He was flanked by several of his followers, their crude weapons at the ready. His voice echoed through the cavern. What are you doing to the core? Preventing it from destroying this planet, Carter replied, stepping forward to meet him. It's unstable. If we don't act now, there won't be anything left to fight over. Korath sneered. And we're supposed to believe that. You work with the elders. You'll fix it just to hand it back to them. Carter's voice was calm but unyielding. If you don't trust me, trust the science. Ask your own people to verify it. But if we stop now, the core will explode, and none of us will be around to argue about who's right. For a moment, Korath seemed to waver, his augmented hand clenching and unclenching. Behind him, his followers shifted nervously, the reality of the situation sinking in. Before Korath could respond, a new group arrived. Xerath and several elders, their elegant forms contrasting sharply with the rugged rogues. The tension in the chamber escalated immediately, weapons raised on both sides. Enough. Carter's voice rang out, silencing the room. This isn't the time for posturing. If you want to survive, you'll work together. Right now. Under Carter's watchful eye, the two factions reluctantly began assisting Monroe and her team. The rogues helped with manual labor, moving equipment, and reinforcing the core's support structures. The elders provided critical knowledge, guiding the stabilization process with insights only they could offer. It was a fragile cooperation, every interaction laden with distrust. But as the minutes ticked by and the core's energy began to stabilize, the air shifted. The factions weren't friends. Not yet, but necessity had forced them into something closer to understanding. Monroe looked up from her console, her expression a mix of relief and exhaustion. We've stabilized it, for now. But this is a temporary fix. If we want permanent stability, we'll need to repair the core itself. That means both sides committing to a long-term solution. Carter turned to Xerath and Korath, his voice firm. You've seen what can happen when you work together. Now you have a choice. Continue this path, or let everything you've built fall apart. For the first time, Korath's defiance seemed to waver. Xerath, though weary, inclined his head. We will discuss the terms, he said. Carter nodded, knowing this was as much victory as he could hope for in the moment. Good. Let's finish what we started. As the team prepared to leave the chamber, Carter glanced back at the core, its flickering light now steady. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start, a fragile truce forged in the heart of chaos. Above all, it was proof that even in the face of division, humanity could find a way to build bridges. But as they ascended to the surface, Carter couldn't shake the feeling that the true test was still to come, the hidden agenda. The Aurora's engines hummed quietly as it hovered above the scorched landscape of Vorithis. Inside, President Nathan Carter stood in the war room, his hands resting on the edge of the central console. The holographic map of the core chamber below flickered faintly, showing a stable energy reading. For now, the planet was safe, but the uneasy truce between the Aven factions felt as fragile as the crystal structures surrounding the core. General Lin Chen and Dr. Eliza Monroe joined Carter, their faces marked by exhaustion and determination. The room buzzed with a quiet urgency. The trial wasn't over yet. We've bought time, Monroe began, her voice tinged with relief. The core won't destabilize for now, but the system is barely holding. If the factions revert to fighting or tamper with it, it'll unravel everything we just achieved. Carter nodded, his mind already racing. Then we keep them from fighting. We need a way to solidify this truce, and fast. Before Chen could respond, the Aurora's AI interrupted. Incoming transmission from the Galactic Council flagship. Carter straightened. Put it through. The holographic display shifted to show the Arbiter, its golden light dimmed and more focused, as if reflecting its scrutiny of the humans. But this time, another figure appeared beside it. Vorsha of the Uran Dominion, his imposing metallic form radiating disdain. Earth representatives, the Arbiter began. You have stabilized the core. This is an impressive first step, but the Council requires assurance that your intervention will lead to lasting peace. Peace requires cooperation, Carter replied evenly. We've managed to bring both factions to the table. The rest is up to them. Vorsha's molten eyes glowed brighter as he leaned into the transmission. And what of the core itself? A power of this magnitude cannot be left in the hands of primitives. Your actions may have delayed disaster, but the potential for catastrophe remains. Carter held his gaze, unflinching. The core belongs to the Avens. It's their world, their choice. Humanity didn't come here to seize control. Perhaps not, Vorsha said, his voice a cold rasp. But your actions suggest otherwise. We have intercepted readings indicating your ship has scanned the core's unique energy signature. Are you collecting data for your own purposes? Carter's eyes narrowed. We scanned it to prevent a disaster, not to exploit it. If you're implying otherwise, I'd suggest you bring evidence instead of accusations. The Arbiter raised a luminous hand, silencing Vorsha's retort. The Council's concern lies in the core's potential to destabilize the galactic balance. Your task is not only to mediate peace, but to ensure that such power is not misused. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Carter and his team in a charged silence. Chen broke it first. They don't trust us. Vorsha's looking for any excuse to discredit us. They see Earth as a wild card, Carter said, his tone grim. And they're not entirely wrong. But this isn't just about the Council's judgment. The core is more than a local issue. It's a symbol of what we're capable of as a species. If we fail here, they'll never see us as equals. Back on the surface of Vorithis, Carter gathered both Aven leaders, Xerath and Korath. In the shadow of their fractured city, the tension between them was palpable, their distrust evident in every glance. Yet the threat of the core had forced a fragile cooperation, one Carter was determined to build upon. "The Council won't leave this planet alone," Carter began, his voice steady. "They see the core as a threat to galactic stability, and they'll act if they think you can't manage it." Korath scowled. "So they'll take it from us, strip us of what little power we have." "Not if you give them no reason to," Carter replied. "You've both seen what the core can do, and what happens when it's neglected. If you want to keep it, you need to prove you can manage it together." Korath inclined his head, his luminous eyes thoughtful. "And how do you propose we achieve this?" Carter looked between them. "Create a neutral council, one made up of members from both factions. Together, you'll oversee the core's operation, maintenance, and distribution of its resources. Transparency is key. If you can show the Council that you're united, they'll have no grounds to intervene." Korath's augmented jaw clenched, but after a long pause, he nodded reluctantly. "It's better than letting them take it." As Carter and his team returned to the Aurora to finalize their report, Monroe stopped him in the corridor. "There's something you need to see," she said, leading him to the lab. On the display was a detailed energy map of the core, but it was the overlay that caught Carter's attention. A secondary energy signature, faint but deliberate, pulsed deep within the structure. "What is that?" he asked. "It's not natural," Monroe said. "It's some kind of hidden mechanism. I think the core was designed with a failsafe, something only its creators would know how to activate." Carter frowned. "And if someone does activate it?" Monroe hesitated. "Best case, it shuts the core down completely. Worst case, it could amplify its energy until the entire planet is incinerated." Carter stared at the display, his mind racing. This wasn't just a test of Earth's diplomacy. It was a potential death trap. And someone, somewhere, had the key. As the Aurora prepared to send its final report to the Council, Carter stood on the observation deck, gazing out at the planet below. The factions had agreed to his proposal, but the real challenge lay ahead. Trust was a fragile thing, and one spark could reignite the flames of conflict. He turned to Chen, who stood silently beside him. "Do you think they'll hold together?" Chen's face was unreadable. "They've got a chance, but if someone wants to tear them apart, they won't need much." Carter nodded, his thoughts heavy. "Then we stay ready. If this trial was a test, the next step will be a reckoning."